centrally sourced data science organization within BLS. There's a lot of, I was going to take a firm count this morning, but I think we have 12 people that are doing data science regularly. It's like most of them are in what I'll call in a minute the data science series. Some of them are operations research analysts, but they're doing full-time data science. I mean, we have a lot of people that are sort of data science adjacent, but they're kind of deployed throughout our sort of product teams, if you will, like the people that are actually producing the statistics. And my office is a central hub for those offices where we try to coordinate across them in terms of training, technology, and policy, that sort of thing. So today I hope to talk about kind of what data science in government means, and I'll explain what those air quotes mean there. And I've collected a bunch of job announcements over the last few years that I'll share some insights from those job announcements. And then we'll kind of step through a typical job announcement so you can kind of see all the individual pieces you should be paying attention to. And then we'll get into some tips about the actual application process itself. And then just look at where data science is in the government as a whole to close things out. So data science, just taking a step back, all of the job announcements that you're going to apply for the federal civilian workforce are going to be on USA Jobs. If you haven't been there already, I'd recommend you go and check it out. Intelligence jobs are not often posted on there. Sometimes you'll see like a CIA post or something, but most of those jobs for things like the NSA, CIA, whatever, are on intelligencecareers.gov. So that's a completely separate thing from what I'll be talking about today. We're going to be purely focused on USA Jobs. The government separates jobs out into job series or kind of like occupations, and each of them has their own sort of general rules about education and experience requirements for particular job levels. And they're sort of rigid, you know, as you'd imagine in a large bureaucracy like the government, there's some pretty rigid rules around how those things are shaped. But sort of interesting to this conversation is up until December of last year, there wasn't a job series for data science. So if you wanted to find a data science position, you had to comb through statistics and you had to comb through economics. And occasionally, in 2020, the Office of Personnel Management allowed posters of jobs to put data scientist in the job title. So you could find economist/data scientist or statistician/data scientist, but there was no central place you could go find those jobs. And really, like there's also a lot of jobs of people doing data science, a lot of like IT professionals, or a lot of programmers and things doing machine learning, doing data engineering work, those sorts of things that sort of are adjacent that are in all kinds of different job categories. So you have to kind of think about those keywords that might get you there and look through all of and so it was kind of a burdensome undertaking to find these jobs. So how would you go about finding those? And so you'd kind of have to go to USA Jobs and do a keyword search and then hopefully kind of parse through and find the ones that you're looking for. And then USA Jobs had a page prior, or it's still there, but it's less useful now, prior to December of 2021 that said, well, if you want to find data science jobs, go look in economics, you might find them there. So it wasn't very helpful in terms of finding those jobs. And so that was part of my original interest in this topic of kind of figuring out like what data science looks like in the government. So what I did was, first of all, like if you want, you can sign up for automated emails and things like alerts, just like you can at any other job search site. And you can sort of enter like, I want to look for jobs in this geographic area, or, I want to look for jobs in this, data science job series, or, you can even use keyword searches. But I wanted to kind of collect a bunch. So USA Jobs has an API. So I wrote some scripts that sort of like loop through and download daily downloads of job announcements that have these 8 keywords in them, and that you see here at the bottom. And those keywords have evolved a little bit over time. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But I wanted to download a data set of USA Jobs posts. And so the script has been running since 2020. And so I've gotten daily downloads for the last 1,100 or so days. And over this time, I've collected about 4,000 unique job announcements. And I'll talk about why unique job announcements is important in a little bit. But of these 4,000 job announcements, there are 768 of them that have data science or data scientist in the job title. And there's 306 of those that have 306 of the 4,000 that are in this new data science series. So you can see that there's several thousand other ones that are not, that don't have data scientist in the job title, aren't in that data science series, but I still think of them as sort of semi-related to data science because they're doing things like machine learning, natural language processing, that sort of thing. So in different information I'm going to show you later, I'll be using different groupings of this, but I just wanted to make sure you had a sense of the numbers there. But I automated all this in Airflow. If you haven't had a chance to use Airflow yet, awesome. And so it's been running every day and without fail for the last few years. So in terms of what I've captured, these are the keywords, like the totals by keyword that I've captured. So it's not surprising that you see data science and data scientists a lot. Those were the ones where it was in the title. And some of the things like I added I think maybe like 6 months ago, I added automated decision because I saw a lot of, not a lot, but I saw some references to automated decision systems. So that's sometimes government organizations will call them that instead of machine learning or something like that. So I wanted to just make sure I wasn't missing those. And I've actually gotten rid of data analysis and data visualization over the last couple of years because those are there was way too many false positives. Everybody does some amount of data analysis. And then there's a lot of postings that list data visualization as some component of the job. And so I've taken those out over time to reduce the number of false positives. But a good distribution of these keywords across these announcements. So over time, these are the monthly totals of what I've collected. And so, the little light blue here is the job announcements with data science in the job title. And so you can see that that's been around since about 2020 when the Office of Personnel Management started allowing it. And then in January of 2022 is when they finally opened up that data science job series, and it's been expanding ever since. And so it took BLS about 6 months to get to the point where we could actually hire under it. There's a whole bureaucracy involved with being able to put out those job announcements. And so we got to it after about 6 months. There's still a lot of organizations that are figuring out how to get through that and post those job announcements. So I think you're going to see that expanding over time. And you can see that it sort of cuts into that total number of people using data scientist, but not in the data science job series, right? So there's still some economist / data scientists out there, but they're fewer and farther between nowadays than they used to be. Okay, so now I want to kind of walk through some job announcements and kind of highlight different aspects of these job announcements. And so this is what a typical one looks like. And I shared the slides with Ashley. She'll send these out to you later. But I have some links in here to like this now closed job announcement, which I'll be using as kind of my illustration of a typical job announcement. And then there was another sort of job announcement that went out from the U.S. Digital Service, which is a sort of a technology group within, I think within the General Services Administration that did a mass hiring across government, across organizations. Instead of each hiring their own, they interviewed like 500 people and then slotted them into different agencies. So it gives you a couple ideas of different ways that announcements are released. So, but I'll walk through, mostly will be around this GS13 data science post that went out last June for BLS. So first of all, the first thing you'd want to do when you're looking at these job posts, and you may even want to just filter on this right off the bat, is you want to look for jobs that you're able to apply to. And so I don't know if anybody already is sort of has their foothold in the government, but if you don't, you need to look for these jobs that say that they're open to the public. And there's a lot of other special categories like veterans, veteran spouses, people with disabilities, a lot of other sorts of categories. And so the main one that I'm going to focus on is like public or current federal employees. And really, for your sake, I'm going to stay focused on these ones that are open to the public. Sort of interesting and I actually just found this out over the weekend as I was putting these slides together. For the most part, the data science job postings are open to the public. And this is different than the government postings overall, where somewhere in the upper 50s, 55% of them are only open to current federal employees. So at least for the data science positions, the majority of them are open to the public. So that's the first thing you want to kind of look at when you're looking at a job announcement. You also might be interested in where these jobs are at. And so in a job announcement, they'll list the city and state where the job is located. Sometimes they might list multiple possible locations. So like if the FBI is hiring and they're fine putting you at any of their field offices, there might be 20 different, or I think there's 50 some different FBI field offices. You might see all of them listed and they say, you can choose when you're done. But now a very common thing is this idea of location negotiable or remote work is a big thing that's kind of come up over the last couple of years. And so, another thing that I found was very interesting is that these data science positions are much more likely to be offered as location negotiable than government jobs overall. And you can imagine that, that's the case, that there's not a lot of face-to-face with customers, maybe with your stakeholders, but you can do that over, Zoom or Teams or whatever. But there isn't that sort of, if you're a Social Security worker or you're an investigator for the FBI or something, there's nothing tying you to a particular location. So these are just more likely to be mobile or remote eligible. And also, I think the government's realized that, in terms of being competitive for these jobs, that's something necessary for us to do, is be flexible about the place, because it's not like it's a very narrow pool of folks if we want everybody to be in the DC area. Also, within these, within the announcement, you'll see whether the job is telework eligible. There's now also a separate data field for remote eligible. So location negotiable and remote eligible are kind of the same thing, but there's some slight differences there. So you'd want to look at both of those. But in terms of the actual locations where these things are at, this is a map of all the ones, all the things that I've collected so far. And some of these are not deduplicated, like I'd mentioned before. So there's a slightly higher total here. And then, as I mentioned, some jobs appear at are offered in multiple locations, but you can see they kind of span the gamut. I think they're really in all states except for, what was it? There's West Virginia. Maybe they did finally hit all states, but one sort of interesting fact is that 22% of the federal civilian workforce is in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. Only 22%. You might think that it would be higher than that, but only 22%. But 49% of the data scientists are in the current set of data scientists are in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. So it sort of makes sense that these are sort of headquarters type operations, so they might be more located in headquarters, but I think that's going to change over time as well as telework is offered more. So the next thing, you might be sort of choosy about what agencies you want to work for. Maybe you're not interested in defense, maybe you're not interested in intelligence, or maybe you're interested in something more specialized like healthcare related organizations, that sort of thing. So important to look at the top of the announcement to see what organization these are being offered for. As I mentioned, there are some very rare circumstances where they're offered for government-wide positions, but those will be very one-off sort of things. So they'll be offered within organizations. So who's offering these jobs? So this is the top 20 organizations. And so a lot of these fall into defense and intelligence. And that's mainly because a big chunk of the government is in defense and intelligence, the federal civilian workforce, at least. Then the healthcare is also big. The Veterans Health Administration is the largest single organization within the federal government. So of course, they're going to have a lot of people just because there are a lot of interest in data science and a lot of people because they're large. But yeah, you can see a kind of a range of different things falling in these top 20 here. But of course, there's a lot of, a long tail to this and a lot of agencies that are interested that just are just smaller. Okay, so the job series is what I was talking about before with the sort of occupational category. And sometimes these job series have a loose relationship with the job title and the duties that they're meant to describe. So sometimes it might say economist, but you read the duties and it's very distinctly a data science profession, or they might say, sometimes it might even say, data scientist, but definitely read the duties to make sure that they didn't just, put it in there for, the sake of, for various reasons. People do weird things, but it can sometimes make the navigation of USA jobs a little bit difficult to manage. But like I said, that data science series is at least a centralized place where you can go and you can look for these jobs now. And so in terms of, like I said, I found these 4,000 jobs using keywords. And so, jobs that have those keywords like machine learning, natural language processing, data science, that sort of thing, fell into 144 unique occupation series, right? So there's a lot of different occupation series that mention some of these things, like business analytics is another one that's commonly mentioned outside of, like financial management or something might use business analytics as a term, which, might still apply and be something you'd be interested in. But these are the most likely occupational categories where you would find something more likely to be related to data science. And data science is currently working its way up the ladder there because it's still fairly new. So another thing that one of the reasons why I really wanted to do this project where I was downloading all of the job announcements is because I wanted all of the text from the duties and the qualifications fields to do a little bit of parsing to see what it is that people are actually looking for. So sometimes in the duties and qualifications, they're going to mention like specific technologies that they're interested in. It's less likely than some other things that they might mention, but here this particular announcement mentioned that they're interested in people using Python. And so looking at the sort of list of skills here, you can see Python, R, SQL. Those are the things you'd be likely to find in any job announcement, whether it's public or private. SAS is maybe a little bit more common in government than you'd find elsewhere, and then so on and down the line there. Cloud platforms are still relatively new and not as widespread, so they're not quite as often mentioned quite as much, but they're in there as well. VBA is still hanging around if anybody's using that. But here I wanted to kind of break out and by job series what they're asking for in terms of those technologies. And so you can, I won't spend a lot of time on this now, but when you see the slides, you can kind of get an idea of, it gives you sort of a fingerprint of what each of these job series, like when they say data scientists, what they mean. And it's sort of interesting to see how it's a little bit different across different job series. So I did the same thing with skills that are mentioned. And so I created this laundry list of search terms that I scoured the text for. And here I found things like presenting results, presentation of results is obviously going to be a very important thing for a applicant to have. But, things like machine learning and artificial intelligence is probably not surprising that those are towards the top because those are the terms that I intentionally searched for keywords for. But things like stakeholder management and having skills in a programming language, writing algorithms, things like that are important. So this is one where I found this very sort of interesting in terms of the comparison across these different areas, was that if you look here, it's very small, I apologize, but if you look at statistics, they're one of the most likely to say that they're interested in machine learning. And again, these are ones with data scientist in the job title. It's not all statistics, but they're more likely to say machine learning than artificial intelligence. And I work with a lot of statisticians, and I think they would, they kind of even balk at the term machine learning sometimes. They're like, oh, it's just regression, but it's something else, but then they're definitely skeptical about using the term artificial intelligence, which is kind of funny. But this will give you an idea of the types of skills that people are looking for in these different occupation series. So then you're probably interested in pay. Maybe this is what should be further forward in the presentation, but people are interested in what these jobs are paying. So the GS pay scale is the most common pay scale in government. There's 171 different pay scales, but the GS pay scale makes up 2/3 of the federal civilian workforce get paid under the GS scale. So most of what I talk about will be related to the GS pay scale. Important to know about this is that when you look at a job announcement, you'll see this pay scale and grade here. Sometimes they'll list multiple ones. It'll say GS 12 or 13. And so you can apply for that job at the 12 level or the 13 level, and you have to kind of specify which of those you think you're qualified for. And so that's how you'll be evaluated in terms of, whether you get through the HR process or not, is whether you're kind of qualified enough to reach that GS 13 level, or if you'll be at the GS 12 level. And then also important to notice is this promotion potential here. And in this particular announcement, it just so happened that the starting pay scale and the promotion potential are the same, but they don't have to be. So, all things being equal, definitely keep an eye out for what are called career ladder positions, where this promotion potential is higher than the starting. So I started as a GS 12, and mine was a promotion potential to 14. So what that means is that you don't have to recompete. You don't have to apply for another job at GS 13 or GS 14. You kind of move to GS 13 when your supervisor chain thinks you're ready to move up, and you move to 14 when they think you're ready to move up, and you don't have to recompete. So all else being equal, that's a nice sort of position to be in. So sort of problematic, I think, for this is that right now the pay grades are tend to be higher in the GS pay scale, like in the 13, 14, 15 range. And GS 13 means, if you talk to people that have been around government for a long time, they will kind of give you this rule of thumb that for a bachelor's degree, that tends to be GS 7 or 9, master's degree is 9 or 11, and PhD is 11 or 12. But it's not realistic for I totally understand that that's not a realistic expectation for high demand job skills, but the government really does not differentiate between the market value of the job skills. Like a GS 12 data scientist is the same as a GS 12 economist and so forth. There are some incentive pays that kind of separate things out, but there really is no incentive pay for data science right now. So but yeah, so that's just one thing that I wanted to give you a heads up about, is there's a lot of things that end up at that GS 13 or above. And I'll recommend later that don't shy away from GS 13 if you don't have, if you're coming out with a master's degree. I would still apply for those jobs, because I think there is still that understanding that, we need to be competitive for folks with your skill sets. And so some people are willing to kind of make that trade-off. HR is much more strict about it than the hiring managers are. So, we'll talk a little bit about that, how you're sort of aiming at two different audiences when you're kind of working through the process. But for right now, things tend to be higher in the GS pay scale. And this is, what I said when I said that it's not super realistic to say, if you're coming out with a bachelor's degree to be at a 7 or a 9, right? It's probably not sort of realistic, especially in the DC area, for that. But I do think that people's expectations about what pay is for data scientists and the competitiveness is sort of centered around big tech and not around like data science in general. So a lot of what people's expectations about pay and things are maybe a little unrealistic as well, but you know, like this is sort of the range that the government is operating within. And I always, you know, want to mention, you know, don't forget about things like other compensation other than just your base salary when you're trying to make your decisions about these things. You know, the government is pretty standardized across things about like your, you know, donation to retirement, the healthcare, all those sorts of things. So be sure you're factoring all of that into your decision and not just focused on the base salary. And then there's a lot of other miscellaneous useful information on these data science job announcements. So like you'll definitely want to pay attention to the opening and closing dates on the job announcement, so you make sure you get your application in time. Some job announcements will have an application limit, so it'll close as soon as it hits that limit. And data science attracts a lot of people to submit applications, so they tend to hit those limits before the closing date. So you have to kind of be ready to jump on some of these. And then the job announcement will also say, you know, give you a rough idea of the number of vacancies an agency is looking for off of this one announcement. So it's not always a one-to-one relationship. They could be doing a mass hiring, but sometimes they use squishy terms. So most job announcements are going to be open for 1 week or 2 weeks. But there's some that are just sort of like generally like left open for a year, and every month they might look at what applications came in and, you know, things like that. But for the most part, they're going to be open for a week or 2 weeks. Data science job announcements are much more likely to have a cap put on them than job announcements in general, because like I said, they tend to be very popular in terms of getting a lot of applications. So to keep the HR folks from getting overwhelmed, they, you know, will put a cap on these things. And I'm not a huge fan of the cap, because I've seen job announcements close in 24 hours. And I think that's unrealistic. If we're asking people to, you know, tailor their resume, to say, tailor it, but tailor it very fast, you know? So like I personally would prefer like a 6-day job announcement with no cap than a 2-week job announcement with a cap. You know, like I'd prefer to have that certainty, but you know, that's still a negotiation process that we always have with HR. And then, you know, most job announcements are going to be like a one-to-one sort of relationship, but you can see that there's a sort of long tail here. And then there's some where they don't specify an exact number, but they say many. So like the job announcement I've been showing you, there were actually slots for 6 data scientists at BLS that were being hired off of that one job announcement. So they put many. I will say that the term few is pretty much useless. Don't pay attention. That doesn't mean that there's more than one slot. Some like HR folks will put few because that means that, like, let's say you find 2 really qualified people, then you could hire that second person even though you weren't looking for them. But if you only say 1, then you can only hire the 1. So sometimes they'll put few just to leave the door open to potentially hiring a second person. All right, so now to the application process. So that was the sort of walking through the announcement. So there's variation across agencies, and I'll say off the bat that I'm not an HR professional. I've been involved in, you know, applying for data science jobs. I've been a hiring manager, and I've been a reviewer that helps HR screen through applications. So that's sort of the experience that I'm coming to this with. But you definitely want to check out like opm.gov or, you know, for things about, you know, and definitely want to read the details of each job announcement to make sure that you're hitting all the right notes in terms of what they're looking for. And then each job announcement is going to have a contact for an HR person, and you can feel free to reach out to them with specific questions you have. And so this is sort of a blanket set of statements here, but for the most part, you're going to have your regular things like your transcripts, your resume, or your CV, and references. There's also going to be an application questionnaire associated with each job announcement. So there'll be a handful of questions that you answer, and that will give like a first screening that they do is based on those questions. And then you also need to take, in your resume, you need to sort of reference why you gave the answers you did on those application questions. So if it says this person needs to know Python and you say, yes, I know Python, you should have in your resume somewhere that, I program in Python. And then you'll want documentation if you fall into any of those categories that I talked about earlier. Like if you're a veteran, you'd have your DD-214, which is the paperwork you get when you leave the military, that sort of thing. People include cover letters, and that's great. But I would say just know that the HR person is not going to read your cover letter. The hiring manager will. So don't hide information about your qualifications in the cover letter and not include it in your resume. Otherwise, you might get screened out, even though like you think you've communicated that information. It's just HR folks have so much to get through that they concentrate on the resume and the transcripts for the most part, and the application questionnaire. All right, so as I mentioned before, with a master's degree, I would say definitely look in that GS 11 to 13 level. So like I said, if somebody says 9 or 11, like I would definitely just say, don't go for the, everybody's situation is different, but I'd say like, I feel like it would undervalue you to go for a GS 9 position. So I definitely look in that 11 to 13 range. And just know that the 13 might be a tough sell if you don't have documented work experience, but it's worth a shot. That I've seen various things happen with that. Like I said, all else being equal, look for those career ladder positions that have promotion potential above where they're currently slotted. The most important thing that you can do, and this is probably, if you take nothing else away from this talk, it's to really concentrate and make sure that you address all the requirements that are part of the qualification section. Because as an HR person, they're culling through there, trying to find people that don't meet those requirements, because it's, I always make this joke that, people tend to think that it's like an algorithm that's, sorting them out, because that's maybe what private companies do. But in the government, it's a little bit worse, because it's actually people acting like algorithms that, they don't feel like they have the flexibility to exercise some judgment in that, like, because they want to be entirely fair. So if there's a rule they applied in one place, they'll definitely apply it in another. So you definitely want to make sure that you hit all of the right pieces there. And one of the biggest things that I've seen is people not providing the right transcripts. So you might, apply for a job. You're like, I have a master's degree. Here's my master's degree transcript, and find out that you need to show, 13 course hours in statistics or something. And on there, it doesn't have specifically like stats 101, stats 102. And so the HR professional can't tell which of those are stats and which aren't. The biggest sort of crasher of dreams in terms of data science careers, I think, is we used to offer jobs under the operations research analyst job series. And that has a hard requirement for 3 credit hours of calculus. And so people would provide their graduate transcript, and their calculus is on their undergraduate transcript. And so there's no way to confirm that they had that. So, or they might, like I saw in one case, there was somebody that had, I think they took an AP class in calculus, and because they had differential equations on their undergrad transcript. And so I even went and I looked it up, and calculus was a prerequisite for that class, but HR was like, no, the rule is we have to be able to confirm that they had 3 credit hours of calculus. So when they say like you have to have X, Y, or Z, definitely make sure that you're communicating that with your transcripts. And if you think your transcripts aren't clear, you can actually like spell it out, like just straight up in your resume, say, this is the relevant coursework that meets this requirement. These are my 15 credits of statistics, even though it says research methods, this is my, credits for statistics. And more often than not, that's enough for those HR professionals to say that, okay, they're not going to second guess, your word on that. They just want to confirm that you meet the base requirements that the hiring manager spelled out. And also, one thing that you'll hear, and if you ever talk to somebody about federal resumes, this is the thing that they'll mention is mirroring the language that's used in the job announcement. Instead of kind of using fancy synonyms and kind of trying to demonstrate your English ability, just focus on trying to, like, any relevant work that you've done that references that corresponds with the job announcement, try to reflect the language that they use. A good example is in the job announcement I applied for my current data science position. For whatever reason, and I don't know why, talked about computational linguistics instead of natural language processing. So I didn't put natural language processing. I used computational linguistics throughout my resume just to make sure I checked that box. So this is what the standard qualifications for the data science job series look like. And these are going to be common across any agency and any job posting for the data science job series. And so, like, right off the top, you guys will, as getting a master's degree in data science, that would get you that education requirement there. But if anybody from outside the data science program is wondering if their physics degree or anything like that apply, that's where you want to make sure that you're referencing those classes that you think meet the requirement to get you over the hump here. And then there's a lot of ambiguity here, and sometimes this is good and sometimes it's not, but fields directly related to data science, and that can mean anything. Like, I've seen a lot of really great applications. Like, as a reviewer, I've seen a lot of great applications from people that are in bioinformatics is a big data science user, physics, all kinds of different things. And so the main thing that I would look for as a reviewer of these is to find instances where people are talking about classes that reference their data science skills or potentially using those data science skills. All right. And then each job announcement in the qualification section is going to have this specialized experience section, and that's going to be job announcement specific. And this is what the hiring manager says, these are the minimum criteria. So there's going to be a duties section, and it's great to address all of those, and you definitely should. But really what you need to get past HR is to document any experience you have related to the specialized experience, because that's what they're going to be looking for, because this is the minimum criteria to get you there. But here again, I don't think anybody really knows what specialized experience equivalent to a GS-12 is. And so that's where there's still a little bit of ambiguity. It's nice because that gives hiring managers flexibility, and it gives you flexibility to kind of demonstrate why you think you meet those requirements. And so definitely try to hit all of these specialized experience requirements. The other thing that you want to do, and this is especially when you're as a communication to HR, is if here it says 1 year of specialized experience, so they're going to try and go through your resume and total up 1 year of experience. So they're going to find the job, they're going to look at the bullets underneath it and say, like, okay, this job seems like it would apply to that. Now I need to total up and see how long they were there. So you're going to want to have the month and year that you started and the month and year that it ended or present. And then you're also going to want to list, and this is the less common thing, is to list the hours per week you worked for that in that position. So if it was a part-time, if you worked a full year of part-time, that would give you like half a year's credit towards that year of specialized experience. Right. So definitely want to list the hours worked per week, or the full-time status. You could say full-time or part-time, but list that along with each of the positions that you list. People also, like, one of the biggest mistakes I see is people feel like they have to keep their resume short, like you would for like the sort of general advice you get for public sector or private sector jobs. That's not the case. Use as much room as you need, within reason. You don't want to give like a novel, but within reason, use as much room as you need in order to explain. So like on my resume, I think I listed like 20 some bullets, right? For one thing, just to make sure that like I highlighted all the bits of experience that related to the duties and the specialized experience, that sort of thing. Use all the room that you need. and don't expect, like, if I have a PhD in data science, you should want me. That's not going to get you past HR. Like that, you definitely need to document all of those things that are in the job announcement. And then remember, like I said, you're communicating to the HR folks first, and then they're going to want a certain type of thing that they're looking for, and then the HR or the hiring managers are going to be looking for something different. So if you're hoping that they'll go and look at your portfolio and see that you program in Python, HR is not going to do that. The hiring manager may not even do that. They like, maybe once it gets down to like 2 or 3 candidates, they'll kind of look through those and kind of separate those out. But just make sure that all the relevant stuff is in the resume, and that your things like awards and stuff are great for hiring managers to see, but HR is not going to pay as much attention to those. So don't use those to kind of get you through the specialized experience. Right. So the application funnel. So this is kind of what happens once your application's received. A certain amount of resumes are going to get filtered out based on not having the right transcript or something like that. Then that questionnaire, they're going to make some sort of threshold cutoff for the questionnaire and separate people out into the people that sort of pass the questionnaire and those that don't. And that usually isn't overly problematic. Where things really get narrowed down is when HR looks at those announcements and tries to correspond them to the specialized experience that was asked for in the job announcement. And so, like, as a hiring manager, like, sometimes, like, I would only see 10 to 20% of the applications that got submitted, because there's just so many people that don't follow that advice that I just gave you, and they might be missing the right transcript, or they might not have like spelled out their experience in the right way. And some people are just like dropping applications, and they might not have even read the duties. And so, like, some of those people you might expect to get screened out anyway, but there's some like really talented people that unfortunately don't get through that HR screen. So that's really like the main thrust of this talk, is to help get through that. And then every organization, even within BLS, there's just a range of different interview processes. There's no standard, 3 interviews, no standard like, whiteboard, anything like that. My office is a little bit weird. We ask that the applicants give a job talk once they've been through an initial panel interview. We ask that they present on some of their research, because we're interested in sort of academic like work, but that's sort of unusual for BLS. So each office is going to have their own way of doing things. And then there's the final selection. And sometimes that ends up weeding people out, because again, I'd say pay attention to like the pay range on the job announcement. Some people think that's a sort of starting point for negotiation, but really that's the range that we can operate within. So, don't come later with like, oh, well, I thought the expectation would be this, and then be disappointed. So like, I definitely look at that pay range. One thing that I will mention though, is for when it says location negotiable, they'll use the locality pay for the sort of other incorporated areas. And so it'll be like the lowest possible pay you could earn for that. So definitely look at the pay table for your location pay area to see what the range of pay within the GS level that you're applying for is. So the amount that's on the job announcement doesn't necessarily reflect what you could potentially earn, because it may not incorporate the locality pay. Hey, I got 9 minutes. Sorry, I'm running through some things. So some other cool information to have is that, like I said, there's a lot more applications being submitted for data science than there are for government jobs in general. So that sort of makes HR folks a little bit wary and weary as well. And then also, only 42% of job announcements result in a selection being made. And that's for a lot of reasons, like that drastic reduction in who's eligible, and also, the negotiation process at the end. Sometimes it'll take a little while, so people will have found other jobs by the end. And so, like, there's a lot of reasons, but 42% is compared to the overall government rate of 52% of job announcements ending in an actual selection. So not great, but something that we're hoping to improve, and hopefully this talks like this can at least increase that average a little bit. So I want to close quickly with just like, what does the current government data science workforce look like? And this is just within the data science job series, because it's hard to kind of narrow down things otherwise. So this is all of the jobs, all the federal civilian jobs in government, 2.1 million. There's a cool data set out there that you guys can, I have a link to here that you can play around with. But just within this little narrow 1% of the full civilian workforce is mathematics and statistical occupations. And within this is just 119 data scientists as of September. I'm sure that's been sort of exponentially increasing since the beginning of, when they introduced the data science job series, but this is the catch up for that. So it's a very small fragment still. So what does that do? Those 119 folks look like? Most of them, or a good chunk of them, are new to government, which is great. Some people are like myself, who transitioned from something else to data science, and some of them have long periods of service. But interestingly, this is still a normal distribution for age. So those people that are coming in with limited federal experience probably were working elsewhere and then come into these jobs. Still tend to be at the bachelor's, master's, doctorate, master's, and doctorate are pretty pretty sizable here, I think, related to this occupation. But I think a lot of those are in unrelated fields. There are people like myself who transitioned, and so data science gets the credit for having a lot of doctorates, even though they're in something else. And then finally, like I said, what I showed you before was the sort of aspirational, like where the job announcements are going out. This is what it actually looks like. And again, mostly at these higher grade levels is where the jobs are at right now in terms of the filled positions. So there's some good references on bls.gov for because we track occupational information. Data science is now an occupation that's recognized. So there's a lot of cool information you can find here. I provide some links about like the geographic distribution of jobs, including the private sector, where they're at. Some pros and cons to working in government. I won't get into this, but lots of good stuff to be had there. And then finally, you can feel free to contact me if you have any questions after this. I'm more than happy to chat about this. Just finally, I have a couple links in here for some things you might want to consider. This Coding It Forward is an internship program that we participate in at BLS. It's a really great thing. And then there's some other sort of groups within government that sort of specialize in providing technology services to the government that you might want to take a look at. All right. And so I think I've only left 5 minutes for questions.
There are a few questions in the chat there, Brandon.
Okay, so Katie, yeah, so I don't have the SQLite database, but I actually do have a link to an Excel spreadsheet that just has the USA jobs information I have it in an S3 bucket. And so there'll be a slide at the end of the slideshow that Ashley has that has a link to that data set. And then I have links to the other data sets that I used. One is from the Office of Personnel Management that again lists all 2.1 million employees, what they earn, where they're located, lots of intrusive information, but it's public record. So it's an interesting data set. Let's see. Are dimensions of the funnel proportional to the data? More or less, Brian, are the dimensions of that cutting. Yeah, like definitely the HR screening is the biggest chunk that gets screened out of job announcements for sure. And yeah, but not entirely proportional. And I keep pushing our HR folks to give us better data about how that works overall. And they need some data scientists. So, look for data science positions in HR organizations, please. Let's see. Yeah, the Harrison's question, I think, is for you, Ashley, about the sending it out. Let's see, Victor.
Hi, Brandon. This question is not specifically about government jobs because I'm an international student, but it's more about, like, as you mentioned, like a lot of people have transitioned from other fields into data science in government, and you yourself come from psychology. So say once you get the education and everything and you're looking for your first experience, like what pointers would you give? Like if your CV has, I don't know, like I'm coming from economics and finance. So say your CV has, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of experience in another field. How do you compete with people that have, I don't know, 4 or 5 years in data science in order to make the transition?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, for those, like, it might be a tough sell because, again, the HR folks are going to look for direct work related experience. I think for jobs in general, like you can, you can communicate your qualifications through things like portfolios and, being able to really hammer it home in an interview. I think, getting, to that interview might be tricky with, if people are kind of screening through those things. But I think, talking about your skills, regardless of where those skills came from, is something that those hiring managers are definitely going to want to see. And so in terms of, you can always too, and again, yeah, with the international, it's maybe not something that would work and with you kind of joining government. But what happens a lot too is we've had a lot of people that are in economist positions that their supervisors are willing to invest in their training because we realize that we're not as competitive for data scientists. So they're willing to upskill people and then reskill them into new. So they're willing to give that chance to economists and statisticians to reskill them into new positions.
Okay, thank you.
Karina?
Yes, thank you, Brandon. Sorry. Are you muted? Okay. I had a question about how important domain expertise is in federal jobs. Like, I come from a background in doing data on education, but I didn't see the Department of Ed listed in your things of have data scientists. I know nothing about health data, but would I be a qualified enough candidate to apply to the CDC because I have experience working with data? So how important is that with federal government jobs?
Yeah, I think for health related ones, the domain expertise is going to be very important. Like a lot of those will be listed as health informatics / data scientists, and so they'll have in the specialized experience some other things that you might need to be able to tick those boxes. For the most part, I'm part of the federal statistical system, so the Census Bureau, the education statistics, health statistics, that domain expertise is not as important. Even, it'd be nice to have an economist with strong data science skills, but that is definitely not something that I even sort of, paid much attention to when I was screening applications. I was looking for those data science skills because we can always build out that economics or domain knowledge, but the sort of that expertise of stuff that we don't really have within government is definitely those sort of newer and modern data science skills is much more important.
And if you have time for one more question, there was one more in the chat there, Brandon.
Yeah, for sure. I'm wondering what the difference between job opens for public and government contractors, security clearance, and requirements. Okay, yeah. So for federal jobs, I actually looked this up. Perna and I had a conversation about this at the R conference, and I did find an actual reference saying about you do have to be a citizen to apply for those federal civilian jobs. But I don't believe you do. I don't think there's any sort of requirement for that for contractor jobs. And there's a lot of great contractor jobs out there as well. So you can definitely look for those. In terms of clearance, for the most part, if you're working at the Pentagon, that's, all of those sorts of things like secret clearances, all those sorts of things. For most of the government, for folks at BLS, we have what's called a public trust clearance. It's a much lower bar that you have to get through. So we bring in intern data scientists in the summer, and we haven't had anybody have any trouble getting through that in a 4-week period. We get them through that process without too much trouble. So the clearance isn't quite as ridiculous there, but I think they do the sort of regular diligence of making sure that you don't have any outstanding convictions or so big large debts and things like that are sort of public record but I don't think I've been through the public trust, secret, and then whatever the higher level than secret is for my current job, because of managers for whatever reason need to get it. And like the main difference is that they send people out to talk to people that you list as contacts, and that's the only real difference in terms of the levels of at least the visible levels of the clearance process.
I want to thank you, Brandon, so much for taking the time today. And this has been wonderful, such wonderful information. I've had several people say that to me. We have in the office saying, this is so great. So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, this was amazing, Brandon. I'm so glad that we talked at the conference because I think this information is very useful to our students. Thank you so much. And it was very organized, and it was a great talk.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And again, reach out if you have any questions.
Absolutely. And I will be posting this on, we have a YouTube channel for our department. So I'll put that, it will be on there later today. And I will also send this out via email to everyone who registered to attend, both the recording and the slides. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions about that. But thank you, Brandon, so much.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.
You
Have
too.
a great day, everybody.
Bye.